We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed boiler repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is-
You're
the failure is-
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Could the Conservatives accept Nigel Farage as a leading partner or even the dominant force on the right? With Reform UK surging and the centre-right vote split, unity is essential. But could the Tories handle Mr Farage's demands and leadership? An Albanian criminal avoids deportation because his son won't eat foreign chicken nuggets. Yes, really. Meanwhile, asylum appeals hit over 34,000, blocking fast-track deportations. With Denmark granting just 860 asylum requests last year, can Britain ever regain control while staying in the ECHR? Thousands of farmers and their tractors descended on Westminster to protest against the government's death duty hike. I'll be bringing you some illuminating footage of what I saw, partly from a forklift high above Whitehall. Nearly half of Generation Z believes Britain is a racist country, and just 1 in 10 says they'd fight to defend it. After years of being taught only guilt and shame, is it any surprise that many young people now see their own nation as an oppressor instead of a force for good? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, former Conservative MP Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. As ever, I want to hear your views. It's a crucial part of the programme. mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has faced calls for meaningful tweaks to planned inheritance tax on farmland from Labour backbenchers. Farmers from across the country descended in Westminster today in protest against the government's family farm tax. The rally, organised by Save British Farming, comes as a petition calling to keep current inheritance tax exemptions for working farms has reached almost 150,000 signatures. Labour has previously insisted it will not make a U-turn on its inheritance tax plans, saying that farmers are the backbone of Britain. Elsewhere, images of illegal migrants and foreign offenders being deported from the UK have just been released today for the first time, as the government confirms 19,000 foreign nationals have been removed from the country since Labour came to power. The unprecedented move is part of a drive by the new government to try to show it's taking tough action on those with no right to live or work in Britain. However, only a tiny fraction of the thousands of deportations include those who cross the English Channel illegally on small boats. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says rules need to be respected.
Well, we need to prevent these dangerous boat crossings in the first place. That's why we are today in Parliament debating new counter-terror style powers to go after the criminal gangs. And we also need to clear the ridiculous backlog that we inherited from the Conservatives, so that also small boat arrivals who have no right to be in the UK can also be returned as part of the increase in returns and enforcement that this Labour government has been setting out. We have to make sure rules are respected and enforced.
A second Labour MP has been suspended from the party for comments made in a WhatsApp group that saw a minister lose his job. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan's been suspended by Labour over his membership of the WhatsApp group containing offensive comments. Mr Ryan has apologised for unacceptable and deeply disappointing comments. Ashley Dalton, Labour MP for West Lancashire, has been appointed as the Minister in the Department of Health and Social Care after Andrew Gwynn was sacked over the weekend. He was also found to be a part of the WhatsApp group. And US President Donald Trump is set to impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports into the US. Steelmakers in Asia have warned the tariffs will impact profitability and volumes of steel. It's unclear whether President Trump will make any exemptions on tariffs. Labour Minister Dame Angela Eagles said earlier today it's in the best interest of both the UK and the US that the two countries carry on with their balanced trade. And those are the latest headlines for now. More news from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Talk of a pact between Kemi Badenoch's Conservatives and Nigel Farage's Reform has grown louder as senior voices warn of the dangers posed by splitting the centre-right vote. Lord McKinley, a former Conservative MP, called it a patriotic duty to protect the country from what he describes as the destructive forces of socialism. Others highlight the tactical advantage of non-aggression agreements in key seats to prevent Labour victories by default. Yet Mr Farage, ever the political disruptor, has made his distrust of the Conservatives clear. Burned by what he terms the betrayal of Brexit in 2019, he views the Tory leadership as dishonourable. He has hinted that any deal would come with hard conditions, scrapping net zero targets, hear, hear, appointing outsiders to run government departments, easier said than done, and adopting a more hardline stance on sovereignty and immigration. This vision has much support within Tory ranks. Yet many Conservative MPs fear that elevating Farage to a position of power would alienate moderate voters and fracture the party further. For others, however, clinging to old divisions is simply self-destructive. Reform's surge in popularity and the resilience of the Tories' base vote means that Labour, despite its manifold failings and unpopularity, remains favourite to win the next election. Could the Tories stomach having Nigel Farage as the leader of a combined right-wing force? After all, the Conservatives kept both Lloyd George and Ramsay MacDonald in government, and they were from the left rather than the right. Would this be the best way to unite the right and stop the decade of the Reverend Starmer that we could otherwise face? Well, I'm joined now by a very distinguished Labour MP, Graham Stringer, and my panel, my most intellectual panel, Sir John Redwood and Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Graham, thank you for coming in. I suppose this starts with the fact that within the Parliamentary Labour Party, you're about the last person carrying the flag for people who've gone to reform from Labour, who believe in the country, who didn't favour the European Union, have doubts about net zero, and actually stand up for your base vote.
I think that's a bit extreme in terms of the vote to leave the European Union. You're pretty close to being right. In terms of representing the traditional Labour base, the number of Labour MPs who basically represent the skilled and unskilled white working class has diminished, but it is still there, genuinely there, although a lot smaller than it used to be.
But this has made room for Nigel and indeed for the Conservatives, because quite a lot of voters in 2019, ex-Labour voters, voted Conservative, and then in 2024 seemed to vote to Reform. So part of the issue for both the Conservatives and Reform is this old Labour vote, which, as I say, I think you do represent, but has been less fashionable, let's put it that way.
I agree with that, and the Labour Party has to try and get it back. I mean, one of the items in the news you just read was that part of the deal that Nigel Farage would want to align with the Conservatives would be to ditch net zero. I would say that if the Labour Party wants to get its base back, then it has to make a great fuss about the cost of electricity. I mean, power, electricity should always have three priorities: security of supply, the cost to the consumer and industry, and then think about the environment. And Labour has done that in reverse. At the moment, we promised reduced fuel prices, and they're now very high indeed. And our industry is leaving. So I think if we want to get our base back, then we have to start with that. We also have to deal, and I've just been in the Commons chamber, we also have to deal with what upsets my constituents, which is both illegal migration and the absolute numbers of migration. The Labour Party has to be quite firm, not racist, but very clear in a plan to deal with what, again, my constituents are angry about and see as a problem.
John, let me bring you in, because there's so much that Graham says that we felt when we were MPs that our party wasn't doing either. This obsession with net zero, putting energy prices up, failure to deal with migration. It makes quite a lot of evidence for Nigel Farage's charge of the Uniparty that the leaderships of both parties have distanced themselves from where voters are.
Yes, it's become a very big problem, and I've just agreed with everything that Graham's been saying. And I was making that case, you were making that case when you weren't a minister in the last Parliament. And I do think that's what Kemi Badenoch has got to resolve very quickly. She says she stands for something different and for sensible Conservative principles. Cheaper energy is absolutely crucial to an industrial revival and to people keeping the jobs that we still got left, and for getting the cost of living under control. So I hope Conservatives will make that leap. All the time that Nigel and Reform are the only party strongly on this issue, they're going to pick up votes from both Labour and Conservative.
And Lloyd, that places them in a strong position. But do you get something from these WhatsApp messages that there is a sense of entitlement, people feeling they're in charge and they're above scrutiny, they won't get caught out? And there's sort of arrogance of power that perhaps both our parties have been suffering from that has distanced them from their voters.
I think you always get some arrogance in all walks of life when people are comfortable in their positions. I mean, I also think there's a lot of people, and this includes some of the new flock that we have in as MPs, forget what we're there for. I think, when I was an MP, what I was there for first and foremost was my constituents and my constituency, above party, above anyone else. It was those that mattered. And so things like bins or things like those little things actually were the things that was important to you because they made sense to the day-to-day lived lives of constituents. And I do think a lot of parties, if we're talking about, the failure of parties, think that big ideas can replace day-to-day living issues, cost of living, the cost of energy, and reform, I think, does speak to some of those things. I don't think it offers many solutions to it, but it does raise them as legitimate concerns. The problem with a reform Tory pact is that actually they probably are greater apart than together. And we saw that with the SDP Liberals. Apart, if you added them up, at points they were over 40, over 50% even at moments. They would have had a landslide. But as soon as they came together, they actually went very quickly down to sub 20%. And I suspect if it was too formal of a pact, what you would get is, rather than reform washing the Conservative brand, the Conservative brand would just infect the Reform brand.
Graham, as a Labour MP, how concerned would you be about a Reform Conservative pact if Reform candidates and Conservative candidates stood aside for each other in certain seats?
Well, as Russell said, if you just add up the support for both parties, then I would have to be very concerned. But it wouldn't add up. There would be Labour voters who'd voted for reform who wouldn't vote for a coalition, and Conservative voters the same. But I think the solution to it is not for the Labour Party. I mean, it's Conservatives and Reformers' business, not the Labour parties. We have to get our ducks in a row. We have to get our policies. We have to get policies that our traditional base likes, and we have moved away from that.
And you may have a very powerful ally in Mr McSweeney, but not many others.
Well, he's a very powerful ally, as you say. Can I just say one thing to take Russell's point up? One of the things that he's rarely commented on in terms of the distance of the Parliamentary Labour Party from the electorate at times, this is the first time an incoming Labour government's cabinet has not been selected by the Parliamentary Labour Party. Elections to the shadow cabinet were abolished when Ed Miliband was leader and have never been restored. And I think there are times, and I'm not going to name names, but when there are members of the cabinet, they've not only got further away from the electorate, they've got further away from the Parliamentary Labour Party because they've never had to seek election.
Well, and they're actually banning industrial activities, and I don't really know why the unions put up with it. I mean, why are they banning all new oil and gas? Why are they getting out of steel completely?
I want to move away from this to give you the last word. Do you think Tories would accept a government led by Nigel Farage?
Well, not at the moment. The leader has made it very clear she wants to battle on, and I think it's going to be a gripping struggle between the Conservatives learning the lessons of the last period in government and making a new offer, and Nigel on his charge at the moment where he's very popular. And I think that's going to be a battle, certainly through to the local elections.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to my panel and to Graham Stringer. After the break, an Albanian criminal avoids deportation apparently because his son likes chicken nuggets in the UK. Is it time for Britain to McLeave the ECHR at last?
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
First, mate, we had lockdowns. Then we had soaring energy costs. Then we had a hike in national insurance for employers. Then we had soaring wage costs. And now the government expects people like you to monitor what people say in boozers. And if you don't, you might get sued. I bet you feel like saying cheers to them, don't you?
Look, it just looks like another war on pubs, you know. Remember, they tried to stop smoking outside as well. Luckily, they rethought that. But look, we've got everything stacked against us, Martin. And the last thing I need to do is go and get in people's conversations. At the end of the day, a pub is like an extension to your home. You know, it's a public house. Friends go to speak. Friends go to meet, unwind after work. It's none of my business what you're talking about. Any good publican, and myself included, anyone that was rude to anyone or on purpose, they want to offend people or they want to dig people out, antagonise them, of course I'm going to step in and say, behave yourself or you go. But look, how can I be on social media talking about everything, transgender, immigration, and people not be allowed to do that at the bar or do that at the table of a pub. It's ridiculous. And these ministers really do need to sort of look at this legislation and see where it could lead, because I'm not going to stop anyone speaking in my pub. Again, if they're trying to antagonise people or they're rude or trying to start trouble, they get thrown out the front door, you know, and any publican worth their salt is going to do that as well. But we're not there to police people's conversations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about a Tory-Reform pact, and the mail mogs have come in. Alan says, Sir Jacob, a Reform Conservative pact, you must be deluded. Reform would be insane to trust the Tory party after 14 years of broken promises. And Mary says, Nigel Farage will not cooperate with the Tories because they campaigned against him repeatedly when he stood for Parliament in the past. They couldn't stop him last time, and they would not serve under his leadership. An Albanian criminal has reportedly been allowed to stay in Britain because his son won't eat foreign chicken nuggets. The Immigration Tribunal ruled it would be unduly harsh to deport the man, citing the child's sensitivity to food from abroad. Well, I rather sympathise, because they eat a lot of dangerous garlic abroad, which I don't like, so perhaps they put that in their nuggets. Meanwhile, asylum appeals in the UK have risen vastly to over 34,000, blocking fast-track deportations and challenging efforts to crack down on illegal migration. Data set to be released on Monday reveals 609 arrests for illegal working last month, marking a 73% increase compared to January 2024, alongside a 48% rise in raids, climbing to 828. Still a pathetic figure compared to the many hundreds of thousands who are here illegally. Compare that to Denmark, with its strict immigration policies granting just 860 asylum requests last year. Their zero refugee strategy may be becoming effective. But can Britain really regain control while staying in the ECHR? I'm joined now by immigration lawyer and friend of the programme, Ivan Sampson. Ivan, thank you for joining me. I mean, it's amazing that Denmark's managed to do this, because Italy hasn't managed to do it and again has been caught up by human rights law. We've got this 34,000 backlog, and chicken nuggets. I mean, I don't know if you even like chicken nuggets, but can they be a human right?
Well, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and it's quite simplistic. But the unduly harsh test was brought in by the Court of Appeal. And the case law on that is it's not just about mere separation of a child from a parent, which can be quite distressing for a child. But what the court said in the Court of Appeal, it's got to be something more than that. It's got to be make the situation for a child bleak. Now, you asked me, if we weren't in the European Convention, could this person be deported? Yes, he could have. It's Article 8 right to prevent the deportation of these individuals, because the courts look at the composite rights of not just the individual, but the rights as a family as a whole. And that composite right is what allows the court to keep these foreign criminals in our country.
And we'll never get rid of them if we stay in the European Convention. So if we want to deal with foreign criminals and get rid of this idea of composite rights, we need to withdraw from the Convention.
Well, I'm a human rights lawyer. I would always defend the right to family and private life. But you've asked me that question, and the question is yes. While we're in the European Convention, it's going to be difficult. But where somebody's been sentenced to more than 4 years imprisonment, it makes it very difficult to shift the balance in favour of the rights of an individual in the family. So even if you have children and you have a wife or settled partner, where you've been sentenced to more than 4 years, the balance shifts in favour of the state. And we have very strong laws to deport foreign criminals. Unfortunately, that the government at the moment, the Home Office, doesn't enforce those laws vigorously enough as they should be doing.
Now, I think the government is appealing this case, but week in, week out, we have similar cases of dangerous criminals who are not being deported under human rights law. So it does seem to me that although the balance may shift after 4 years, it clearly doesn't shift far enough, but that as long as we're in the convention, we're caught, and we need to be absolutely clear that we will only have laws passed by our own parliament.
That is correct. And you have to remember that while we're in the convention, the rulings of Strasbourg, I'm afraid, bind our courts. So while we're in the convention, we're bound by the rulings of Strasbourg and a raft of jurisprudence of Strasbourg, which I'm afraid the UK courts have to abide by.
Well, Ivan, thank you very much, as always. Well, my panel is still with me, and I have in front of me some chicken nuggets, I believe, from Mr. McDonald, a purveyor of chicken nuggets and other delicacies, though apparently you can also get them from Mr. Fortnum and Mr. Mason and other distinguished outlets. Sir John, can I press you to chicken nugget? And Lloyd, will you? They smell terrible, it has to be said, but I shall try one in the interest of research and of my viewers. But if one of you can speak, yes, John, it is clear the ECHR is something we've got to pull out of. That's the clear message from this. These chicken nuggets cannot be an excuse to remain in this country.
Well, no, it's an absurd excuse, and it may be a more extreme one, but there are a lot of these cases where people have no sympathy. These are criminals who've come in and they trump up ways round through this law. I mean, I, in the last Parliament, with other colleagues, supported amendments to legislation which would not have required us to pull out of the whole ECHR. I think that's quite an extreme way of tackling this. We'd have just simply asserted in British law that on this issue, the British court had to apply our immigration law, which would have said chicken nuggets are not a suitable excuse.
Which, of course, is what we did when we first joined. We didn't have the right of direct appeal. So you can be within the ECHR and not have your judges overturn your laws the whole time.
Yeah, well, we're a sovereign country again, but we don't behave like one. All we need to do is legislate in Parliament to say this piece of immigration law is going to apply, notwithstanding anything else, and then it would work.
I mean, I find it curious that at one moment you say Denmark has managed to do it, and then you say we wouldn't be able to do it unless we withdraw. Denmark has not withdrawn. So it clearly is...
Italy can't do it.
No, Italy tried to do it in a ham-fisted way. This is the problem.
Denmark's done it for 1 year, so we'll see whether they keep that up.
Italy tried to create a processing centre in Albania where they processed people and then sent people back, sometimes without full processing. That's what the European courts were against, not the fact that you can process people harshly when you process them and quickly and send them back quickly. It was the lack of proper due process. Now, in Britain, where we have had disagreements with the courts before, and we've had them on numerous other areas, what ends up winning is politics over law. And so this idea that the law will win is, I'm afraid, just not true. If we look at prisoners' votes...
But it's winning all the time at the moment.
No. If these cases went to the European Court, I think you'd actually find that they wouldn't. Not so many would be won.
So we should repeal the Human Rights Act, so that our courts can't do it.
What is actually happening is our judges are constantly trying to apply it in the most liberal sense, and that can be corrected by a law passed in this country, and it wouldn't
but what about
undermine...
our hopeless Attorney General, who has made one really important change to advice to ministers that they must not make a decision which has a reasonable chance of being overturned? Now, that means that ministers will always take the least risky option, and actually you need ministers to think, well, there is a legal case for this. It's worth having it settled.
Yes.
Rather than, you know, there's a 55% chance of losing, I won't do it. That just binds up the whole of government. It's a terrible decision of his.
It makes total sense for the government to say on if there are two relatively suitable options in front of you and one of them will have a less of a chance of bogging us down in courts, we should go for that. But if there is a good reason to implement a rule that might go to the courts, that should be done. And I think that's what the Attorney General's trying to say. When you have two equal solutions, go for the less risky one, because bogging yourself down in court isn't good either.
No, but he's putting a blanket over every good idea, and this government has some good ideas occasionally, and the Attorney General won't let them do it. I mean, they are very angry about it, and they're right to be very angry about it. We don't want to be governed by an international lawyer who always takes the view that the foreigner is right.
And the Attorney General is extremely powerful in this, because the Attorney General sets the law across government. There is no appeal against the Attorney General's decision. So an aggressive Attorney General can be a complete menace and means that chicken McNuggets will be part of people's human rights.
The Attorney General is a political appointee. The Attorney General should be interpreting things politically.
But he isn't.
But he isn't. He's doing
Not for Britain, he isn't. I mean, on this or on giving away the Chagos, he's against us.
And if the government don't agree with him, they should replace him. And lawyers are not neutral actors.
All right.
Well, we agree with that, because one of the
John
Labour
Lloyd
peers wants to get rid of him.
And McDonald's. I maligned these McNuggets. Having eaten one, it's absolutely delicious. Tasty-fair. In a moment, we're going to be talking about farmers who, in their thousands with their tractors, descended upon Westminster to protest against the government's death duty hike. I'll be bringing you some illuminating footage of what I saw, partly from a forklift high above Whitehall. And in the break, I'm going to eat another chicken nugget. Thank you. Sure.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The weather in the Mediterranean this week is looking a bit mixed. We do have some showers lingering, particularly around the Adriatic at the moment, parts of Italy and France as well. Thunderstorms recently across Malta and Sicily should be clearing off a little bit. Generally, there's some brighter skies for parts of southern Spain, though we do have this rain band pushing into areas of Portugal as well. Once that system does clear, though, it's generally expected to turn a touch brighter for western areas, though still rather changeable further towards the east.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. We're sticking with the cloudy and cold theme as we go through the next 24 hours or so, with some further rain, sleet and hill snow, particularly towards eastern parts. It's all because we have an easterly flow across the country due to an area of high pressure sitting over Scandinavia. We currently also have a system towards the southeast that's bringing some rain, sleet, even a bit of snow for a time being across southeastern parts, but that generally clears away, and then it's, yes, that easterly flow. So eastern areas most likely to see the damp weather, some hill snow, particularly over the Pennines, the high ground of Scotland, quite likely. Temperatures dropping to low single figures for many places, the cloud cover stopping them falling too low, but where we get any clear skies towards the west, a touch of frost is quite likely. Looking at the details first thing tomorrow morning then, a grey start for many places towards the south, quite murky across parts of the southeast, East Anglia with a bit of rain here, heading further north, and it's always towards eastern areas where it's going to be damper, so some further outbreaks of rain, a bit more sleet, even some hill snow over any modest higher ground. Further west, a greater chance of a dry start, even some brightness, but with that, like I said, it could be a touch frosty as well. Sticking with the largely cloudy theme as we go through much of tomorrow, really. Still some outbreaks of rain, perhaps some sleet and hill snow across parts of eastern Scotland, eastern northeastern England as well. Further west, a greater chance of some brightness developing, perhaps some sunshine breaking through, a little bit less than today for many places. Temperatures may be similar to today, really. A bit less of a breeze, though, towards the south, so perhaps feeling a bit less chilly. Looking ahead to Wednesday, we still have that easterly flow, so still some outbreaks of rain, sleet and hill snow towards eastern parts, perhaps fewer than through today and tomorrow. Potential for some rain affecting parts of Cornwall, and otherwise there may be perhaps a few more breaks in the clouds, so a bit more sunshine for some of us. But on the whole, staying pretty cloudy, and that's the theme through the end of the week, and it is going to stay chilly as well. Bye-bye.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about asylum and the mail mogs have come in. Elizabeth, I agree with Elizabeth. Criminals being deported should take their families with them. No one has a right to be kept in this country on the taxpayer, chicken nuggets or not. And Phil says, hi, Sir Jacob. I've applied to the ECHR on behalf of the chicken, who could become a chicken nugget. It's against a chicken's human rights to become a chicken nugget. Well, there's a nugget of wisdom in that, I'm sure. Thousands of farmers and their tractors gathered in Westminster today to protest against Labour's death tax increase on family farms. I was in Whitehall earlier, and this is what I saw.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point that England will be a free country, but a free country based on farming. Our farmers are the lifeblood of our nation. They've come from Somerset, from Sussex, from Surrey, from Sussex, from Northern Ireland, from Scotland and from Wales. They will not be destroyed by this socialist government. They will protest politely and peacefully, and here they are. It is a wonderful sight to behold, and they deserve our support. This panoramic view we have of so many who have come today, and look how orderly it is, how proper, how frankly British. We should all be proud.
As well as getting a bird's eye view of the magnificent spectacle of polite but firm protest by the British farming community, I also spoke to some farmers about what the changes can mean for them. And while I was there, I bumped into a fellow farming aficionado and GB News presenter. While we agree on the policy, we managed to have a short debate.
What we should be saying is that we will abolish death duties altogether. We need to take the lead on this and say it's not just about farmers and businesses. It's about this desperate, unfair, cruel tax on sadness that should be abolished, full stop.
Yeah. Sadly, Jacob, you can't take the lead because we've done that already.
I've been saying it for years.
Yeah, but
well, I wasn't in a position to do it, but you haven't been in a position to do it either. No, we are both voices crying in the wilderness.
Well, Jacob, my wilderness may not be quite what it was. We're going to win the next general election, and we will abolish inheritance tax. End of.
Well, so what is next for Labour's attack on British farming? Is it time for them to recognise the failure of this policy and change course? And my panel, I'm glad to say, is still with me. And Lloyd, I'll come to you first. Would you be advising your former colleagues in the House of Commons that when you're in a hole, stop digging?
I think there's. I agree with inheritance tax in many regards. I actually think it should be used to pay for social care, and that would be a much fairer way to directly link it to a social care kind of levy. So I don't think there's any problem with that. But I do think that on these particular changes, they are not going to create a huge amount of money, and they've created a huge amount of dissatisfaction. And I would be trying to look at ways that you could build bridges with those communities, particularly rural and semi-rural communities. I don't think they're going to U-turn on this particular issue, but I do think we need to make sure that we are looking after our farmers and food producers.
Because it's not just farmers, is it? It's farmers and businesses. And one of the farmers I was speaking to, in addition to his land, has £3 million worth of equipment. And that if you are farming, you need these very significant levels of investment. And if you take 20% of that out every generation, the farms just won't continue. It's not a reasonable or proportionate tax.
Well, I do think that farming is different to other businesses. And so I think that there is a...
Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it the same for any capital-intensive business? It may not be true for a service business, which doesn't have much capital tied up in it, though the intangible asset may be an issue. But if you've got a factory with a production line, there's a big asset in that. And if you take 20% of it out every generation, that really harms the continuation of the business.
Well, the business is not linked to the home and the livelihood of the individual in the same way. The business can be shared with other people. The business can have multiple shareholders. The business can be can continue to function. With farming, it only functions as a livelihood, and the profit to asset ratio is a negative in farming, whereas there is no other industry where the asset to profit ratio is a negative.
I mean, that is true. The capital return on farming is extremely low, which makes it particularly pernicious for farmers.
Well, indeed, but then there are other capital-intensive businesses, as you're suggesting, that can also have low profitability, but we want them to carry on as they currently do before the tax. Now, I think it's a tragedy, because surely we want more family businesses in this country. We need more small businesses, some of which will be very successful and grow into bigger businesses and pay a lot more tax and employ a lot more people. You need a good population of smaller businesses, something Conservative governments in the past promoted, and then they got a bit negative about them in the most recent period in office, and now Labour are taking a sledgehammer to smash them, and I think it should be stopped.
But it's a stunningly unfair tax, because anyone who makes arrangements doesn't have to pay it. It's therefore a tax on sadness. It's a tax on tragedy, that somebody dies unexpectedly, and therefore they will get hit by it. But most people with decent accountants never end up paying this tax.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think that may be true of the rich ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
The ones it's really aimed at.
But the businesses I'm thinking about, where they're getting by and they're not making big profits, and quite often they don't take both a salary for their work and a profit out of the business. The profit and the salary are the same thing. And so they're actually cheating themselves.
Come on, so these very small businesses, they're way below the threshold as well, the threshold that is...
No, but they may not be, because land and property is so valuable and machinery is so expensive, as Jacob has reminded us. So that's the type of business in farming that I'm really worried about.
I agree with you on farming. And I think if there is a case for other specific business areas where intrinsically you have a negative profit to asset ratio. And what I mean by that is that if I put my cash, that asset, in a interest-bearing bank account that just paid the inflation rate, I would end up with more in the bank account than I would with the farming business. And that is effectively a subsidy for cheap food for us. And we want that to continue, because we want cheap food and good food in our country. I don't think there are other industries, and if there are, they should have exemptions for them too. But I think it is dangerous to suddenly say, well, we should have none of those taxes, because there are many reasons why we would want people to limit what is being passed on generation to generation.
Why would you want to do that? Why don't you want generation to cascade, but wealth to cascade through the generations?
It doesn't cascade. What happens is wealth, there is a finite amount of money in this country. And so, like any monopoly, if what happens is you start to monopolise wealth, land and assets over other people, what you end up with...
Lloyd, if you don't tax them to death, we'll all have more of it.
Monopolies.
This is brilliant. Lloyd has finally given us the socialist fallacy. John, now over to you. Why is it
dynamism.
not true?
Let people earn more, save more, accumulate more wealth, pass it down to children who then might use it, or they may give it to somebody else.
Trickle-down doesn't work.
But
And we had a dynamic...
How else do you get better off other than working for a rich person? Or getting some wealth from them because they want to buy something from you?
The idea that you just allow wealth to continue to be concentrated, and power and assets to be continued to be
concentrated. We're doing the opposite of that. We're saying more people are going to be wealthy
in this country. Land doesn't grow in this country, and fixed assets don't grow, and the number of people that employed...
Since Malthus wrote and said that we would run out of food production, agricultural productivity has been 2 to 3% per annum. So although land doesn't grow, productivity and wealth on that land increases year in, year out, generation on generation. And so the idea that wealth doesn't grow is just wrong.
And we want more of them. That's the whole point. That's how you have a richer society. You spread the wealth around. And what you don't do is have a bigger public sector. We've just seen an 18.5% reduction in the productivity of the health service in 5 years. It's a complete disaster.
The the putting wealth in smaller and smaller numbers of hands, which is what you see in parts of America and Latin America, actually doesn't provide a better lifestyle for the majority of people in those countries.
We agree with that. That's why we want many more people to be owners.
Yes, I agree. People should be owners of their houses. They should be owners of small businesses and cooperatives, etc., etc. But if you allow someone who has garnered an amount to be passed on to a single person or a couple of people,
operating business.
And then they add what they have also gained from their own wealth into that pot. That pot, every generation gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And what that does is deprive other people of access to that pot.
That assumes nobody else sets up pots, that other pots don't grow, that there are no entrepreneurs.
Well, that is what's happening.
And
that is what's happening. If you look at the big... If you look at the
JCB and Dyson, for example, two of our most successful businesses, did not exist 50 years ago. There may be some great landowners, Duke of Westminster's estate. Yes, that existed 300 years ago. But this isn't true. We get wealth creators and we get money anew from each generation.
But we see out of wealth creators, Elon Musk is a very good example, rich already becomes richer. You know, kind of actually you don't have people who start from the bottom who are really able to access the education. Musk was a millionaire from a South African mining family.
Multi-billionaire.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a completely different scale.
Exactly. But has that improved the lives of people in South Africa where he extracted his wealth from? No.
Well, it's improved the lives of people who are working for
all around
Tesla.
the world.
All around the world. Anyway, thank you very much to my panel. In a moment, nearly half of Generation Z believes Britain is a racist country, and just 1 in 10 say they'd fight for king and country. Is this fair on our younger generation?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans during the Second World War. He was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about inheritance tax and the farmers' protest, and the mail mogs have come in. Dave says, Jacob, the only reason for inheritance tax on farms is to force the sale of farmland for use in green projects. And Graham says, Jacob, why has the King not got involved with supporting the farmers in their dispute? We'd never hear Keir, since he is a strong advocate for the countryside and food production. Well, I think the reason for that is that he can't, because he's the King and he's not allowed to get involved politically. A nation that once stood firm against tyranny that shaped the modern world now faces an unsettling truth. Nearly half of Generation Z, those aged 18 to 27, believe Britain is a racist country. And only 1 in 10 say they would fight to defend it. Is it any wonder when for years our young people have been brainwashed to hate Britain, to feel embarrassed by its history rather than proud of its achievements? Schools and universities teach a one-sided, distorted view of our past, focusing only on guilt and shame while ignoring the incredible contributions Britain has made to democracy, science and human rights. The result, a generation that sees their own country as an oppressor rather than a force for good. However, there are signs of significant support amongst younger age groups for Reform UK, particularly men aged 18 to 24, where Nigel Farage's party emerged as the third most popular choice in a recent poll. Does Gen Z really hate our country? Well, I'm joined now by somebody who may know, a model and journalist student, Summer Nesbitt. Thank you very much for joining me. What do you think of your country?
I like my country. I think it's quite nice.
So, in the survey, I think it went down, the survey in the Times, 80% were proud of their country in 2004, and that's gone down to 41%. Why do you think your contemporaries aren't as proud of their country as older generations?
Probably because there's a lot of access to like social media now, so we can kind of see like politically what's happening, and also we're a lot more empathetic, and I guess people could argue that older generations aren't that empathetic.
And do you think that Britain is a racist country?
I think it can sometimes be a racist country, yeah.
And what does it mean? Let me try and establish what being a racist country means, because inevitably in any country there will be people who are unpleasant and are rude and are difficult and may express their views in a racist way. But to say the country is racist when it's got anti-discrimination laws, it's got race protection laws, seems to me to be a step too far.
Yeah, I think it just generally depends, really. I think obviously it's a very big word to say that Britain is racist. I think it is a lot more tolerant than say other countries, but I do think that there is some steps that can be taken that means that it does discriminate. There is like unconscious bias, I would say.
And where do you think that comes from?
I'm not too sure. I think maybe because of colonisation in general. Like, I think because we were colonised, of course, and England did tend to colonise people, maybe it's kind of seeped down in, like, generations.
Right, OK. And what about, would you fight for king and country if called upon?
No way.
You wouldn't?
No, I don't want to die.
Even if we were against Nazi Germany in 1930, you wouldn't think that would be the right thing to do?
I wouldn't be here in Nazi Germany, though, realistically. But no, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. I'd rather be like a typical like housewife. I'd rather be a housewife.
All right. Well, Summer, thank you very much for that. I might now go to my panel. Oxford Union, 1930s, wouldn't vote for king and country. Should we not make too much of this? Because actually, young people often have funny views which they grow out of.
I think it shows we need to persuade them by telling them a different aspect of our history. I think some of the schools are clearly misleading them into believing that it was a nasty colonising country that treated people extremely badly, and not pointing out some of the great news about the United Kingdom that you have mentioned, or the fact that we led on liberating the slaves, not enslaving them more.
That's important, isn't it? That our history is actually one we can by and large be proud of. It's not without its faults, but actually we spread civilization, the rule of law, democracy around the world, and in 2 great world wars, we lost huge numbers of our own people to save values we believe were important.
Yes, I think we should be able to celebrate our country, but warts and all. And I think that means that we can say, yes, there were lots of things that have been done that are awful, but in the arch of history, generally we have got things right and we should be proud of our country. I think it's not outrageous to say we are a racist country, but it's outrageous to say we are a more racist country than other countries. Do you understand what I mean? You know, we can be a racist country, but we can be the least racist country in most of the world. Do you understand? So I think there's nothing wrong with criticising, but you have to put it in context and say, yes, we might have done bad things, but did we do more bad things than other countries? And on the scale of it, we come out pretty well.
You see, the racist country thing, I've always thought an odd thing to say.
I know, you find that difficult, yes.
Because there are definitely racists in this country.
Yes.
I mean, I had some who were constituents who used to write to me regularly. But as a country, we have always recognised the right of every individual equal before the law. And that seems to me so fundamental.
Well, most people are not racist, and we have very strong laws to stop people being racist. So I agree with you. We're not a racist country.
We agree on the fact that we have strong laws, that we're pretty good. I think what happens is we're getting worked up on linguistics. I think it is acceptable to say that we are racist. We have institutional issues still to work on, and not always one way. It might well be actually that we have institutional issues to work on of, kind of for the white majority population, etc. There are race issues that this country does not get right, and that would be, in my view, the term racist. But what you do is you put it in context and you say, yes, but are those race issues as bad as America, as Brazil, as Germany? No.
All right, well, I've allowed Lloyd the last word for once, but thank you both to him and to John Redwood. And finally, it seems the Church of England has ruled that non-alcoholic wine and gluten-free bread cannot be used for Holy Communion. That's right, if you want to participate, it's got to be wheat flour bread and fermented grape juice, no exceptions. However, some members of the Anglican Communion are moaning about the injustice for those who can't consume wheat or alcohol. They're sticking with tradition. Bread must be wheat and wine must be fermented grape juice. No substitutes like rice or potato flour allowed. Reverend Canon Alice Kemp raised concerns asking whether the Church could be more inclusive for those with dietary restrictions. But Bishop Michael Ipgrave responded that any change would require overturning two long-held positions. One, that bread and wine should remain as they are, and two, that receiving communion in one kind, either bread or wine, is still considered full participation. Indeed, I only ever take it in one kind. However, without belief in transubstantiation and in view of apostolic curie, does it really matter? Anyway, up next is Patrick Christie's. Patrick, are you going to be talking about papal encyclicals in your programme this evening?
No, although I might start going to communion just to feel something, Jacob. But anyway, so we've got Lord Hermer. Does Starmer have to sack him after it appears that he advised Caribbean nations on reparations, foreign aid, 22 million quid to Nepal's green policies, and Porsches for Albanian prisons? I was at the farmers' protest. I've got loads more, Jacob. Tune in to find out.
All right, it's going to be very exciting, especially talking about the Attorney-General. That's coming up after the weather. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. In case you've forgotten, I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation. And the weather in Somerset, oh, it's absolutely lovely. It is so good, it's perfect. It's Trumpian weather in Somerset tomorrow.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. We're sticking with the cloudy and cold theme as we go through the next 24 hours or so, with some further rain, sleet and hill snow, particularly towards eastern parts. It's all because we have an easterly flow across the country due to an area of high pressure sitting over Scandinavia. We currently also have a system towards the southeast that's bringing some rain, sleet, even a bit of snow for a time being across southeastern parts, but that generally clears away. And then it's, yes, that easterly flow. So eastern areas most likely to see the damp weather. Some hill snow, particularly over the Pennines, the high ground of Scotland, quite likely. Temperatures dropping to low single figures for many places. The cloud cover stopping them falling too low, but where we get any clear skies towards the west, a touch of frost is quite likely. Looking at the details first thing tomorrow morning then, a grey start for many places towards the south. Quite murky across parts of the southeast, East Anglia with a bit of rain here. Heading further north, and it's always towards eastern areas where it's going to be damper. So some further outbreaks of rain, a bit more sleet, even some hill snow over any modest higher ground. Further west, a greater chance of a dry start, even some brightness, but with that, like I said, it could be a touch frosty as well. Sticking with the largely cloudy theme as we go through much of tomorrow, really. Still some outbreaks of rain, perhaps some sleet and hail snow across parts of eastern Scotland, eastern, northeastern England as well. Further west, a greater chance of some brightness developing, perhaps some sunshine breaking through, a little bit less than today for many places. Temperatures may be similar to today, really. A bit less of a breeze, though, towards the south, so perhaps feeling a bit less chilly. Looking ahead to Wednesday, we still have that easterly flow, so still some outbreaks of rain, sleet and hail snow towards eastern parts, perhaps fewer than through today and tomorrow. Potential for some rain affecting parts of Cornwall, and otherwise there may be perhaps a few more breaks in the clouds, so a bit more sunshine for some of us. But on the whole, staying pretty cloudy, and that's the theme through the end of the week, and it is going to stay chilly as well. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you